Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Special Committee on Assessment Practices to order. We'll begin with our invited guests. We have David Montgomery, who's the solicitor of our par board, who will be presenting to us tonight. And at this point, we'll have a roll call of all members.
Mr. DeMarco.
Here.
I'm sorry, is that here? Oh, thank you. Ms. Filiaggi. Here. Mr. Betkowski. Here. Mr. Palmieri.
Here.
Chairman Patina.
Here.
We also have council members Pritzker, George, Palmasina, and Magray Chapkus. And in person, we also have Mr. Macy and Mr. Baldwin. That's everyone.
Since this is the first meeting, obviously, there are no approval of minutes at this point. We'll have the agenda items at this point, and before we begin, I'd just like to welcome everyone to this first meeting of the Special Committee on Assessment Practices. This committee was created in the wake of the litigation involving how sales data is used in the county's assessment appeals process, which is an issue of concern to all of the county's taxpayers. In addition, the court's orders may have significant implications for our budget, and our own home rule charter requires council to formulate and enact. And we therefore owe it to ourselves and our constituents to have a thorough understanding of how the new lay of the land regarding the assessment appeals process may affect us. In order to accomplish this, I'm envisioning a multi-meeting process. For tonight's first meeting, I want to have the existing assessment process explained to us in detail by David Montgomery, the solicitor of our par board. I'd like Dave to give us at least a basic idea of how the county's existing assessment code and the Commonwealth Law of Assessments, primarily the Uniformity Clause of the PA Constitution, the General Assessment Code, and the Second-Class County Assessment Code work together, and explain how our assessments serve as the determinant of the tax base for the municipalities and school districts within the county. I'd also like him to walk us through the basics of the appeal process, how it works, how decisions are made, what factors are considered, and the administrative mechanics of the process. Things like how hearing officers are employed, the par board's function in the appeals process, etc. For our second meeting, what I'm envisioning is going to devote a session to explain the results of both the Clifton and the Joffrey litigation. Clifton, because I believe that everyone should understand where we've been with the county's assessment code and what the broader implications of Joffrey may be as a result. And Joffrey, so everyone has a full understanding of what's changing about the assessment appeals and how. After these two sessions, I'm envisioning at least 3 additional meetings. One meeting would be exactly what led us to Joffrey. I'd like to hear the plaintiff's side of what happened that led to the controversy, as well as the administration side of the same conversation. I don't see any merit in hearing anything inflammatory or accusatory in this conversation, just the facts of what actually happened and played out. Another meeting will be about what the impact on the county's taxpayers was and will be moving forward. What's the best estimate of how many property owners will be impacted by the changes and the financial impact upon both them and the county at large? What are the practical impacts for us? Questions like these are very important as we try to chart a path forwards. I think receiving a wide range of opinions will be helpful here. Both sides of the Joffrey litigation will likely have thoughts on the issue, but I think it would be wise to hear from some professional assessors as well. I think we should also give at least a few school districts and or municipalities a chance to comment, because they're going to have to work through the same types of potential budgetary and or administrative considerations that we are. Finally, I believe the committee owes the public a description of what we believe happened, what the effects were, whether we feel the same form of remedial action is necessary, and what forms that remedy may take or be. I want to stress that we should not in any fashion jump to any conclusions based upon incomplete knowledge. We owe the people of this county a thorough, impartial review, followed by the fairest, most well-reasoned, and carefully considered path forward that we can develop. Fault and blame are matters to the courts and the public. Council's job at this point is finding the best solution possible for the situation we're in. And the only way to do that is by dispassionately following where our inquiries lead us no matter how difficult that may be. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Solicitor of the B part, David Montgomery. Dave?
Great, thank you, President Pena. Thank you for the opportunity to address council and the members on assessment issues. And as requested, I'll go through the history of the board somewhat. As with long memories may recall, the board was created back in 2001 when the county adopted the home rule and split the assessment function from the hearing function. My board, the Board of Property Assessment, conducts hearings and performs the hearing function with respect to appeals. And the county administration has retained the assessment function. So the assessment function is performed by the entity known as the Office of Property Assessment. And the hearing function is performed by the Board of Property Assessment Appeals and Review. And the two are often conflated, but just think of it as the county administration assesses the property, puts the number, values the property, and then our board provides a right of appeal from that decision. So you'll just think in terms of government. Anytime government makes a decision regarding property rights, people have the right to challenge that decision. And in this case, the decision that people have the right to challenge is what the county says your property is worth. And that's the assessed, or that's the assessed value that your property taxes are based on. So anytime the government issues a decision on your tax appeals, you have a right to appeal that. And that's what the Board of Property Assessment. My board is an independent board. 4 of the members are appointed by county council and 3 by the executive. We have 5 current members. We have 2 openings, but by its very design, we're an independent board, and the theory being that the public should have a venue where they can get an independent adjudication of their appeal of what the county has said their property is worth. So we strive to be independent minded. We make our own decisions according to the provisions of the administrative code. Everything we do in our power is derived from the administrative code of the county. So the administrative code provides that the board is to be comprised of 7 members of different qualifications, reflecting different professions and life backgrounds. They all have to be county residents, but one of them is required to be a lawyer with real estate experience. 2 are required to be real estate brokers or appraisers. We have to have a design professional on our board, and we have to have members and just general members of the public who are able to serve on our board. So I believe the 2 outstanding positions to be filled. One is a lawyer with real estate experience. That's a council appointment. And the other, I believe, is an executive appointment, and that would be a design professional. So those are the 2 members we're looking for. The members all serve staggered terms of 4 years. And that is generally term limited at 12 years. So through the appointment process and the staggered terms, the board strives to maintain its independence. Now, the county code provides that we are to hear all assessment appeals of value. We're to hear appeals of exemption status and abatement status and challenges to a property's clean and green status and what are called catastrophic appeals. So you can have just a garden variety value appeal of your assessment, or you can come to us to get a ruling on whether your property should be exempt from taxes. It's a purely public charity or under religious exemption, or whether you're qualified for any number of statutory abatements that are offered through Pennsylvania law. We receive tax appeals from either school districts or homeowners or property owners. And as you might know, I think there are around 570,000 individual parcels in Allegheny County. And so any property owner can file an appeal with our board. You don't have to be the subject of a revaluation. You don't have to be the subject of a notice of change. If you're a property owner, you can come to our board and file an appeal, an annual appeal, every year before March 31st. And by statute, by Pennsylvania law, school districts have the same right to file appeals as property owners. So we have, I say school districts because it's predominantly school districts among the taxing bodies that are filing appeals. So to illustrate, this year we had approximately 12,700 appeals filed with the board. And I believe approximately 85% of those were filed by taxing bodies, by school districts, and the other 15% by property owners. You can imagine, given that large number of appeals that are filed, that our 7-member board can't hear all of those appeals themselves. So the county code provides that the board is permitted to engage independent contractors to serve as hearing officers, to conduct the hearings and make recommendations to the board. So there are two types of hearing officers that we're allowed to engage, and some are called commercial hearing officers, and they have to have a specialized qualification of being commercial appraisers or have equivalent appraisal experience. And they get paid a per diem payment of $300 per day for hearings through the board. And then we have residential hearing officers, and those have to be licensed real estate professionals, basically real estate agents, or lawyers with real estate experience. So if you know anything about lawyers, that covers most lawyers, or so they'll tell you, that they have some real estate experience and can do the job. So the real estate or the residential hearing officers get paid $225 per day. You know, make a little pitch here for the board that those numbers have not changed since 2001. And as we try to engage hearing officers to come in and work for us, we're finding it more and more difficult every year, especially with the commercial appraisers. They're finding that $300 per diem is not attractive enough for them to come and spend a day with us. I guess just times have changed since 2001. It was very attractive 10 or 15 years ago, less so today. So I think we need to take a look at the per diem that's being paid for our commercial hearing officers. And I would say that for residential, we've lost a lot because that number has never been increased since 2001. So our board members are part-time, so they rely upon these independent contractors to conduct the hearings. So what is a typical hearing day like at the Bee Park? Ever since the inception of the COVID pandemic, we moved to telephone hearings. So the way it works is that we have our Board of Assessment rules, which require the parties to submit their evidence prior to the hearing. And they're loaded into a format called OnBase, and on the a county document center, which is accessible through the county internet. A document center that allows the parties to view each other's evidence prior to the hearing, and then on the day of the hearing allows the hearing officer to look at the evidence himself in real time as he's conducting the hearing by telephone. So on the day of the hearing officer will call both parties, swear them in, and conduct a quasi-judicial proceeding with the appellants who are before him. So the hearing is designed to offer a certain level of due process to the participants. That requires that all the hearings are recorded and there's a record made of every hearing, including the parties are allowed to see the evidence and have an opportunity to ask questions and see the evidence against them. and to make comments to the hearing officer. And then the next step is the hearing officer will write up a report and try to tell the board what he thinks of, or he or she thinks of the evidence and what he thinks the results should be. And then the board takes those reports and they all have laptops, all of the board members, so they have access to the evidence as well. And so based on the hearing officer reports and their evidence, to the degree they want to look at the evidence and evaluate it independently, the board members will approve the recommendation, and then the entire board will vote on whether to accept the recommendation or reject it at their regular meetings. The board meets every 2 weeks, and during a normal year, when we're not involved in a litigation over the common level ratio, every 2 weeks we would have a lengthy list of approvals by the board. And then after the board votes on those approval lists, the determinations are created by the Office of Property Assessment, by the administration, and mailed out to all of the parties to the litigation. And our decisions are appealable to the court within 30 days. So the important thing for everybody to remember is that our county, Allegheny County, has a 2-tier assessment process. You can come to the board for free. We do not charge an appeal fee. And if you're unhappy, if anyone's unhappy with what we do, whether it's the taxing body or the property owner, you have a right of appeal to take it across the street to the Court of Common Pleas. Now, the judges don't want to hear all these tax appeals, so they've created a board of viewers where they delegate the tax appeal hearings to the board of viewers. So the board of viewers get these appeals, and there's a filing fee for these. Just like any court proceeding, you have to pay a filing fee. And when you get in front of the board of viewers, they are conducting what's called a de novo hearing, meaning it's a fresh start. So really, if you are unhappy with our board, you get a fresh bite at the apple in front of the board of viewers. So we encourage everybody to look at it. If you're unhappy with our level, to consider filing an appeal with the board of viewers and try to get give people a chance, a couple of chances to get the result that they're seeking through the appeal process. So the appeals are based on the evidence presented at the hearing. Our hearing officers don't do any independent investigations. Everything is to be decided based on the 4 corners of the evidence that are presented at the hearing. So we don't have hearing officers going out and doing internet research or looking on the multi-lists or, trying to go out and drive by the properties. Everything is done within the 4 corners of the hearing itself, informed by the hearing officers' just professional experience and knowledge of the process. So what are they looking for during a hearing? The law provides that hearing officers or appellants can seek either what's called a base year appeal or a market value appeal. So that requires me to back up just a second, back into the assessment history that we've had. So in 2001, the board was created, and there was a countywide reassessment. I believe it was in 2002. And then there was litigation after that 2002 assessment called the Clifton litigation. And that was before Judge Weddick. And the plaintiffs in that litigation claimed that the county assessment system had shown a lack of uniformity to the degree the system was no longer being operated in a constitutional manner, because the county was relying on a base year system that was set back in 2002. It's what I mean by base year. It's when the county has a reassessment that assigns all of the properties that are reassessed on a countywide basis, they all achieve or are given a base year number. So that remains the base year. But over time, as you move away from the base year, the base year can no longer be uniform and fair to the people who are subject to the base year system. And Judge Weddick held around 2009 or 2010, I can't remember the precise date, that the entire system as applied in Allegheny County was unconstitutional. And he ruled that the base year system as applied was unconstitutional. And he said, and that's true throughout the entire state. Well, the Supreme Court got the appeal eventually, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, and said, no, Judge Weddick, we don't agree with you. The entire system is not unconstitutional, but we agree with you that Allegheny County needs to do a reassessment. So Judge Weddick, per the instructions from the court, the Supreme Court ordered a reassessment of the county, and that took place in 2012, and it was ordered to be used to be applied in 2013. So that's how we got here with the current base year value. So the last countywide reassessment was in 2012 for use in 2013. And so the county base year is a 2012 base year value. That's what we're dealing with. So most people have never had an appeal since then. If you look at your assessment, you're looking at your 2012 base year value. If you haven't engaged in the appeal process or haven't had a change notice from the county since then, you have a 2012 base year. So now we're 10 years past that. And there have been a lot of tax appeals since then. And tax appeals that are brought by the taxing bodies, by and large, are based on sales price. That's the vast majority of taxing body appeals are based on sales price, because the taxing bodies are identifying those properties that are being sold with a higher sales price than the base year. So they see an opportunity to say, hey, that base year is not valid. We need to assess this property according to its current market value. So you can see the problem there immediately, that assessing on the current market value as opposed to base year is not uniform. It's not uniform with the base year. It's not fair to treat people with their market value when all of their neighbors are still at their base year. So how does the state remedy that? Well, the state has state law that requires counties, including Allegheny County, to apply a common level ratio to bring uniformity between market value appeals and the base year value for everybody else. So that common level ratio is the device that's designed to provide uniformity. So what the common level ratio is it's a ratio that's calculated annually for every county in the state, pursuant to state law, where the respective counties are required to provide their sales data for the year in question to the State Tax Equalization Board. And based on those sales reports from all of the respective counties, the State Tax Equalization Board, also known as the STEP, turns around and issues a certified CLR for each of the counties. So Allegheny County gets a new CLR every year that's issued at the end of June in the summer of every year that is used by the county. So that CLR is designed to create uniformity between market value and the base year. So obviously the CLR is very important. It's a very important thing because it's basically a ratio that after my board conducts a hearing and we find a market value, we say, your property is not worth $100,000 anymore. Now, you know, based on the market, 2022, it's now worth $200,000. So the CLR is applied to what we find is the market value, and that's supposed to, in some rough justice, trend it back to the base year. Now it's not always going to bring you back to your $100,000 value, because maybe this was wrong. Maybe this base year value was wrong to begin with, or maybe for some reason your property is actually worth 200,000 and it's worth a lot more than what the base year value was. So anyways, the CLR is going to be applied, and it's, in some respects, it's going to trend it back to the base year. So when you get your assessed value decision from the board on the market appeals, you're always going to get the assessed value, and that's going to have the CLR built into it. So so the CLR is very important, and that assessed value is what the property taxes are going to be based on. You're not taxed on your market value. You're taxed on your assessed value. So that's why the CLR is such a critical thing, because that's what brings you from market value down to your assessed value. So it's very important that the CLR be correct. And just incidentally, the assessed value also doesn't include things like a homestead abatement. That's taken off the top of the market value from the county taxes. There may be senior citizen relief that's removed from that. The property might be partially exempt, so that would take away some of the assessed value as well. So you're only paying taxes on assessed value, not market value. So very important to take a look at that. Our hearings generally run for about 6 months a year. We have an appeal period that runs by county ordinance through March 31st of every year. So once March 31st occurs, that's the deadline. We don't accept any more appeals after that. And that's per the code. And, the board doesn't have the ability to change that without county council's action. So that's the appeal period for filing. We do have a process where we accept late filed appeals if you can prove that there's an administrative breakdown or some extraordinary circumstances. Let's say you had COVID and were in the hospital for the entire month of March. You couldn't file your appeal and you were in intensive care. And we'll let you file an appeal then, but it has to be extraordinary circumstances for a late filed appeal. But otherwise, that appeal deadline requires, in my view, requires county council action. There are appeals there are notices throughout the year that the county issues when people have building additions or changes to their property that affect value. Then the county is authorized to issue change notices for your property. If you put an addition on, or if you tear something down, you may get a change notice for the next year based on a building permit. But otherwise, your assessment period is fixed on March 31st, and that's when you have to file your appeal by then. I don't know if anybody has any questions about our process or what I've missed. Mr. President Catania, what kind of topics would you like me to address that maybe I've...
Actually, I think you did a nice job going over everything. I'd like to open it up to questions at this point in time, if you don't mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, we'll begin with those members on the board. If you could keep it to 2 questions, then we can circle back to you initially if you have additional questions. Councilman Montgomery, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can see why people are raising hell down there all the time, because of the confusion between the assessed values and the whatever that from 2012. Yeah, I can see why you're getting a host of appeals. I'll tell you the truth, I didn't realize that we had as much authority here, council, as we have, in pertaining to this.
Well, let me just, on that score, council used to have a representative that would attend all of our board meetings. And our board meetings are also available by Zoom. So, council certainly welcome to come over anytime to our board meetings, which are held at 8 a.m. on twice a month on Thursdays. But yeah, over in the county office building.
Can't wait to get the line.
I'll be honest here. And then by the ordinance, board is required to make reports to county council about our operation. And that used to be accomplished through this, the constant presence at our meetings, and you would always get our minutes of our meetings And I don't know is that happening? Are you seeing our minutes for our meetings? I think that should be happening.
We have not seen
Ken,
it.
I think we should be sending those over as a matter of course.
I can forward them to the members then.
Okay, right, because I think, yeah, I think the minutes should be forwarded over just as a matter of course, but you do have, I mean, we're a creature of the county code, so. And then if we want to change our rules, we can do that internally. We can pass new rules, but none of them become effective if council objects within 30 days. So you have sort of a pocket veto, or you have the ability to veto any rule changes that we were to make. So, for example, if we tried to open the appeal period, council ultimately would have to approve that.
Well, since we haven't been getting any of the minutes, so we're really cognizant of what's going on here.
Right.
So, yeah. So in actuality, then it's a moot point for us really, until we have the information necessary to make for an example, if you change the rules in the past year, we wouldn't have a
So
clue.
we're required to provide notice of any rule changes
Okay,
to council.
okay. That wouldn't be in the minutes?
Well, no, I think the last time we changed rules, I think was a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half
A
ago.
year and a half ago.
And when we do that, we send the rules to the president, county council. We also send the changes to the county executive and the solicitors, so they know what we're contemplating. And just, I think it's our best practice is we try to do that before we vote. So we hear any objections even before a vote takes place.
Well, thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman DeMarco?
Sure. You mentioned in 2001, the board was created, and the power was split.
Yeah.
Where did that power reside prior to 2001?
Well, that's a great question for one of our attendees tonight, Mike Sully, who used to be on the Board of Property Assessment in its former incarnation. But it was, the board itself was part of the administrative branch. There was a unitary government back then as far as assessments went. You ever think to add that, Mike? Is that accurate?
Part of it. Judge Reddick ruled that the Board of Property Assessment Appeals and Review in 1997 was independent of county government, which meant that board didn't answer to any elected county official. So we were independent. I was vice chairman of the appeals board in the 90s. We ran the assessment operations and the board members heard appeals. We heard 9,000, 10,000 appeals a year. That's the norm, I guess, in a base year system. So home rule government comes in the year 2000 and says, there's a conflict of interest. We're going to separate the body that makes the assessments from the people who hear the appeals. And thus that stated board. So that's my,
Right.
that's all.
Yeah, I seem to remember, I mean, I was alive back then, didn't necessarily pay as much attention to all this, right? But I remember things weren't all peaches and cream at that time either. I mean, people had complaints about their assessed values, you know, and so this is something that's always going to be an issue or has been an issue to date. And when we talk about the CLR, that's a way to try to adjust the value of new property sales. That's something you're trying to set it towards a base here, but I mean, I think it would be foolish to believe that property that was purchased in 2013 in many areas didn't increase in value. So what's happening is you're doing a reassessment of properties that are changing hands, they're sold, but nothing's being done to those other properties.
Right, I think that's correct, and I think that was the issue in the Clifton case, was that you had different parts of the county appreciating in value at different rates. So I think Judge Weddick's holding in that case was that, you know, over time, you were gonna have a lack of uniformity between sectors of the county if you maintain a base year system indefinitely, that you're gonna have the Marshall Townships of the world or Lawrenceville's of the world rapidly increasing in value. And you're gonna have other more stable or even depreciating areas of the counties that don't perform that way. And over time, that creates a lack of uniformity.
So, sorry for the third question here, okay?
Okay.
So in a perfect world, you know, how would we address? Would we do periodic assessments, say every 3 years or something? How would we go about trying to ensure both uniformity, but also fairness to the property owners in Allegheny County? That they could feel that they're being treated properly and not being treated differently from their neighbors.
Well, I mean, there should be reviews of whether, there's a lack of uniformity is emerging. And when that occurs, steps should be taken to address it, whether it be through reassessments or whatever measure county council sees fit. But that's one of the tools in your belt. Yeah.
Okay. Councilman Bukowski?
So this isn't a situation that's unique to Allegheny County in the state. Is it others,
Which,
the CLR?
no, in
So-
fact, all the counties, I believe all the counties are issued a CLR every year.
So I'm a big fan of not reinventing the wheel, or any of our neighboring counties, Butler, Washington, Armstrong, Westmoreland. How are they dealing with essentially the same issue? That there must be, I'm more familiar with Butler County because I live in the north. So there would be areas of Butler County that are rapid growing, lots of new development, where they should also be seeing similar disparities. I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
I would think so. And the last I understood, I think Butler is still on a very antiquated base year system. And I'll have to put Sharon DePaulo on the spot here. Sharon, do you know when Butler's last?
1969.
Butler County's last reassessment was 1969. So they have a CLR, which is probably in the low teens or single digits.
It's 12. I think that's off of the rules.
So, and then Washington County had a reassessment after us, used the same company incidentally. And so I think Washington County CLR is probably, I don't know, again, I'd have to look at the numbers. Yeah,
87.
yeah, so roughly the same as Allegheny counties. Beaver County recently had a reassessment. So you'll find, you go to any county, you'll find a different situation. There's 60 different situations in Pennsylvania. Now, some of them aren't using a CLR at all, because if you've recently had a reassessment, you are what's called a 100% of a predetermined ratio. So if you're at 100% of the base year value, all your assessed property, because you've recently reassessed, you don't use the CLR at that point. But once the state tax equalization board identifies a disparity between the 100% reassessed value and the falling CLR, that's when the board is obliged to use the CLR in the tax appeal context.
Anything else, Council? For the record, since you guys in the audience are participating, could you introduce yourselves?
My name is Sharon Hall. I'm an attorney. I practice assessment law exclusively throughout all Pennsylvania 67 counties.
My name is Preston Moore. I'm a real estate agent for Howard Hanna, and I am the first vice president for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. And in 2024, I should be president of that association.
Thank you.
My name is Mike Soley. I was manager of the Office of Property Assessment, and also I ran the Board of Property Assessment Appeals and Review, 2 different stints. I was the oversight for 2 countywide reassessments. That was tough.
And I'm glad they're here because they know a lot of the history of all of this. So I appreciate
How we got here is important.
Yeah, I thank you all for being in attendance tonight. Councilwoman Falaji?
Thank you, President Katina.
Oh,
Gentlemen.
Ryan has a participant. Ryan's been quiet in the background.
I'm the solicitor for the county controller's office.
Oh, okay.
I've done a number of these appeals on behalf of the city way back in the day.
Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Actually, my question was more along the lines of, what Councilman Montgomery was asking, but just about us, council as a whole, because we've indicated that we do have some input, but we must not have been giving any input over the last couple of years. And for whatever reason, I find it also curious. It sounds as if some of this on the path to how we arrive here, right, is it looks as if we're short on people and maybe even short on experience and short on oversight. And one of the things that you indicated was that council has input on who gets on the assessment board.
Correct.
And there's a vacancy that we are responsible for, and that's a lawyer who is familiar with real estate. How long has that vacancy been open?
Since Friday.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. You could have added that, and then I wouldn't have to go through this long question.
Yeah, and it has to go through we haven't gotten anything yet, so.
Okay.
No, I think this member just sent his resignation letter to the president of council.
Yeah, so it has to go through the official channels.
Okay, so we've been on top of it there.
You were so on top of it, but it's a lawyer with 10
Guess it's
years
that email.
of real estate experience. And there are a lot of
Better
them.
check.
Yes.
He needs to put it
So-
in official.
Okay, so that's something that we can address and be responsible for and make sure that gets taken care of. The minutes that we can get and then figure out what we can do, I think we're deciding that that's going to start back up again, right?
Mhm.
And so we can get more involved. Okay, thank you. I have no further
Thank you very
questions. Time.
And anytime anybody has a question for the board, they can contact me and we can try to get back to you ASAP. Okay? Or you can come and watch and listen to hearings anytime you want to do that. They're by telephone and they're conducted out of the county office building on the 3rd floor. So anybody can come over at any time and observe and see what we do.
So in actuality, so we've got a breakdown here of sorts since we haven't been receiving minutes. So we really
I don't know if I'd characterize it as a breakdown because it's it's a quasi-independent authority. What you guys do, we provide we provide assistance where we can, some oversight, but you're your own body. Pretty much
Right.
making those
Yeah.
independent decisions.
That's correct. Yeah, but I think the sharing of the minutes would be a really good idea. Because I think it's it's a very important board. And I think it's important for council to have their fingers on what's going on over there because it affects a lot of people in the county.
I had the same debate last night, the air advisory committee, which I'm on. Their minutes, they're talking about they don't want to record the meetings anymore. They don't want to have minutes and blah, 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 back and forth. It's like, that's essential that we have a record, so we're going back and forth. None of us on the advisory board, we're not happy with this whole new situation because of that. Again, how are you supposed to vote on things when you really don't have a record of what's going on? And everybody talks about transparency. What the hell is it? Isn't that transparency?
No, I agree.
For the record, Mr. Montgomery, I want to thank you for, because obviously you and I have been on a number of calls talking about this process, and you've been very helpful to Ken and providing information and working with us. Some of the things I wanted to ask you about. So if the CLR is reduced, obviously we know it's still tied up in the courts, but if the CLR, it comes back and the CLR is reduced, what happens to the appeals in the pipeline?
Well, we are not currently issuing determinations for 2022. And we have a lot of them in the pipeline because we're waiting on what this common level ratio is finally going to be. Now, I know that Judge Hertzberg has issued his decision, but the school district immediately appealed it, City of Pittsburgh School District. And there is one particular issue that if the school district prevails, could change the common level ratio that Judge Hertzberg has ordered. So we're hesitant to proceed with decisions because those decisions could be wrong and have to be recalculated.
So you'd have to re-adjudicate them and basically, or what, how would that, what I'm trying to understand is how would, I understand you've delayed the appeal, I mean, you've delayed her hearing further appeals, but what exactly, how does that all work together? I mean, because it seems to me like if you continued on the process and something changed in the appeals process, you'd have to, if you made a decision, you'd have to come back and basically, I mean, try to fix that. Is that correct?
Yeah, just to illustrate, Judge Hertzberg concluded that ordered that the CLR should be 63.53. Now, if the school district prevails on one of these issues that they've identified to appeal, the so-called sales chasing issue, I don't want to get too obscure for you, but that's one of the issues they've appealed. That could bump the CLR from 63.53 up to maybe 65 or 66. I don't know what the numbers would be, but it could be a significant change. And then if we issue 3,000 decisions on the prior number, those are all automatically going to be wrong if we've used the wrong CLR according to the appellate court. So that's why we've kind of put the brakes on things until we can get a resolution at the appellate level.
So irrespective of what that CLR ultimately becomes, it seems to me as a novice and one that doesn't truly understand all of the complexities that go into that process, that there's not going to be real equity irrespective of what the decision is.
It's never going to be perfect. There's kind of a rough uniformity or rough justice. It's never going to be completely.
And I won't say, and I'm speaking to that simply on a county level, on a local level, because clearly there's never going to be equity across the Commonwealth. But even more so, it will be more difficult because, again, if there isn't a mandate to reevaluate on an ongoing basis, on a regular ongoing basis, the inequities are always going to emerge.
They will continue to emerge. I agree with that. And then it also rewards people who, more sophisticated, have lawyers. And then, you can have a lot of people who don't have lawyers or the expertise to go out and appeal their properties, and they get left behind compared to people who may be more sophisticated.
Councilman DeMarco, and then we're going to open it up to everybody else.
Sure. With the school district taking and appealing the judge's decision, the appeals that are here for this year, as well as the appeals that were generated previously, are on hold. Okay. If this falls into next year, for any of these people who have filed appeals previously, are any of them negatively impacted?
Well,
how do we go back and
here's one,
make them whole?
Well, there's several problems that you've identified. One is that, let's say these school district appeals are not adjudicated until 2023. Well, then people are going to get a tax bill. If they lose and they get a big tax increase, they're going to get a double 2 years of tax increases next year all at once. And so that'll make them happy. That'll be difficult. So any delay in our process, I don't think is good in that respect. And then we have a fair minority of owner appeals that, we could, those are owners typically who are saying, you've overvalued me. I'm entitled to a refund. And I prefer to get that in 2022 rather than 2023. So that's an issue for them. So, just working back a little bit, in April, we had a consent order in the Joffrey litigation, and we thought this was gonna take 4 weeks to get the new number. That's what the estimate was, 4 weeks. From April 27th, we thought, well, okay, they really mean 5 or 6, so we'll have a new number at the beginning of June. Didn't happen. So we didn't get a new number in June. And then for one reason or another, won't go into the details, extended into July. And we thought, okay, finally, we're gonna get a new number. We're gonna start issuing decisions. We didn't get a new number until September 1st. And then immediately the school district appealed. So over some fairly arcane issues that they appealed for. So, but yes, Councilman DeMarco, yes, there are hardships caused by delay.
And, I'm assuming we would be able to make those folks whole. So if you have someone that's appealed, a homeowner, and they've appealed here in 2022 because they believe they've been overassessed and they're paying higher school taxes. But the finality here doesn't come through until 2023.
You'll get your refund, but Sharon, I put you on the spot.
Will they be able to recover for 2022?
Do they don't get interest on that refund, do they?
They're supposed to get interest.
Or they will get it, they'll get statutory interest? Okay, so,
Practice on it.
so in theory, they're gonna be made whole because they're gonna get a refund with interest. So it'll take a while.
Councilman Macy?
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mr. Montgomery, for coming in. Appreciate that. I went through the appeals process. It wasn't that arduous, but it was financially a problem. But on the other hand, all the criteria that was used historically and criteria that's used, well, that will be used presently for assessing or appraising a home, are they going to be the same, or is it any of it's changed?
Well, remember the assessing is done by the county. So I don't think their methodology is going to change as a result of this litigation at all. In fact, that whole process will remain intact. It's just the CLR that will likely change. And it's a big change, but it's not going to change the fundamentals of how the properties are valued. The only thing that will change that is would be a countywide reassessment that would take a look at everybody.
And we hear a lot on the news and through various people, property owners, that is, that the school districts are the ones who appeal. Now, is this, is school districts the majority of taxing bodies, or what other taxing bodies do you find that go into the appeal process?
Well, I would say the clear majority, maybe the vast majority, are school districts, because you got to look, the county share of the millage is fairly slight. What's the county millage?
4.73.
4.7. Thank you very much. And a lot of school districts are between 20 and 30 mills. So they have the greatest interest. And so they are the most aggressive participants of the taxing bodies.
So they find this to be low hanging fruit then for them.
Right. And the school districts, their strategy is generally dictated by using certain formulas to determine which properties will have the greatest return on their appeals that they file. Now, incidentally, a lot of property owners hate that, obviously. It's called the newcomer's tax. And they say, well, you're singling me out because I'm a recent purchaser. And that has been litigated a couple of times at the appellate level in Pennsylvania. And historically, the appellate courts have said, no, it's not illegal. It's not a spot assessment. School districts have the right to appeal you. But now, I was discussing with Sharon DePaulo before the hearing that there's an appeal in front of the Supreme Court that was recently argued, where they're taking another look at that, whether the legality of school districts filing appeals based on sales price or on recent sales. Did I fairly characterize that, Sharon? Did I get you right?
Yeah, the Jan Burchard case was argued last September 15th in front of the Supreme Court. But the issue there is based on sale price. And that's the first time that they've taken up the question of whether it's okay for schools to pay using sales price as the filter.
Yeah, because they nibbled, they've danced around the edges of this and they've said, well, you can't single out classes of properties for appeal. You can't just go appeal every out of town or owns property in your district. That's unconstitutional. You can't just appeal apartment buildings. You have to have a uniform way of choosing your appeals. And what they've said historically is, well, if school districts are using sales price, that's okay, because it's generally uniform. And if you're the unlucky son of a gun that gets appealed, well, it was uniform anyways. But now Mr. Paulo is telling us the Supreme Court is taking a look at that issue and may revisit the propriety of appeals based on sales price.
Maybe one more.
Yeah.
Thank you. And one last question. When we look at assessments, appraisals, et cetera, how much does comparables enter into this reevaluation?
Well, they're very important. It depends from what perspective. Our board, the state law tells us our board is not allowed to make changes based on sales price alone. So our board doesn't, anytime we have an appeal, if you just give us the sales price, we won't make a change. We require extrinsic evidence of comparables to support, so we have some confidence that the sales price actually reflects a market value. So what the school districts typically do, and what we ask them to do, or any appellant, is bring in sales comparables. And those are in the eye of the beholder. This is an art, not a science. So sometimes a comparable will be appropriate and valid if it's from the same neighborhood, the same type and condition and vintage. But a comparable could also be from another town if it's the appropriate type of property. So if you're appealing golf courses, you might have comparables from Butler County or Westmoreland or Somerset. If you're appealing steel mills, you might have a national market. If you're appealing big box stores like a Lowe's, you might have Lowe's from Cleveland or from Pittsburgh, or these are all judgments that are made by appraisers, and we ask our hearing officers to weigh the comparables, to use their professional experience to determine whether they think the comparables are appropriate and valid. So we have maybe 30 independent contractors, and they're all going to have slightly different life experiences and professional abilities. So there's always going to be some variance in what we do.
Thank you, Councilman Walton.
As an aside, because we're probably getting close to the time of the shutdown. Before we go, you talked about the challenge that you have in terms of retaining hearing officers, and because of the issue of compensation. What do you believe, from your perspective, would be an appropriate rate of compensation to retain hearing officers?
Well, like I said, the commercial guys are at 300 per day, and the residentials are 225 per day. And neither of them have had a bump since 2001. So I don't know, I can make a proposal to council, but if you put me on the spot, I would say at least another 25 a day for both categories. And I don't know, but I think I'd like to maybe discuss that with my board before I make a more
Please do.
proposal. I will.
You were speaking with Councilman Cena and myself about precisely this issue, I think, a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the numbers?
I don't know. I don't recall. I don't recall. If we were gonna raise it, I would think at least 25 a day for the residential and.
Yeah, now they had presented a proposal to raise those rates.
Okay.
About a year ago.
No, I'd have to.
We talked about it, they got dropped.
Yeah. Oh, and one other thing, we did discuss, the board will kill me if I don't bring this up. The board has not had an increase in their stipend since
We talked about
2001.
We just talked about that.
We talked about that before you arrived.
Okay, good.
So, yeah.
So that's on their radar. And now that we're seeking 2 additional board members, I think that would help. a little bit for them. Oh, and incidentally, let me just add, their stipend ran out at the end of September, so they're gonna be working for free for the rest of the year. So it would be a.
Geez, they have a lot in common with us, don't they?
That's exactly right.
Councilmember Pritzio, do you have any questions? Councilmember Palmasino, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. I just wanted to thank Mr. Montgomery and his team for all the information and taking time out throughout the evening to give us new, fresh ideas, and we look forward to working with him. But thank you very much.
Councilmember Nakaradi Chapkus.
Just one brief question. Thank you. So given that school districts are 85% of the appeals that are filed, and based on the recent court ruling and then the appeal, are you hearing that school districts are reevaluating their budgets? Like, how are they assessing then the impact to their budgets and the approaches that they might have to take moving forward?
No, they are not bringing their budget concerns to the board. Some school districts have come to the board and said that they would like to withdraw their pending appeals because the changed CLR is forcing them to recalculate the efficacy of the pending appeals from their perspective. They no longer work.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Dewar.
No questions, Ken. Just want to thank the speakers for their time and information, and I echo my colleagues' comments about looking forward to working together for a solution on this. So thank you.
Councilmember Pritzio.
Any other questions before we adjourn? Hearing none, this meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.